Hello and welcome back to another video. So in this video we are going to learn about authentication, basics of authentication in Ktor, and we are going to secure our endpoints so that not registered users cannot send post requests to add new fruits in our database. And of course this is a common thing in a real project. So let's start here in IntelliJ. First I'm going to add some new models. So I'm going to add here in the data package in model, I'm going to make a new Kotlin data class. I'm going to call this account request. And our account request here in this example is going to be very basic, just username and password. So I'm going to do username, which is a string, and password, which is also a string. Annotate this with serializable, import, and of course, I would like for this example to use the username as the primary ID or the primary key, if you want to call it that way. So I'm going to annotate the username with serial name, and that serial name is going to be underscore ID. Okay, next I'm going to create another data class for the actual user. Now this is going to represent the user in our database, but the account request that we have just created is going to be represent the body that the client will send when they want to log in, for example. Now in a real scenario, registering might require some additional parameters. Usually when you register, you enter your name, maybe your age, depending on if you need that information or not. But for simplicity here, I'm going to use the account request data class for both the login and the register. So here I'm going to create another model for the user, which is basically going to be the same. Username and password, serial name, ID, and annotate with serializable, just like that. Okay. Next, what we want to do is create some functions, set up a users collection, and create some functions to add users to that collection in the database. So go to the database package, and here in my database file, I'm going to use the same file here. Feel free to use a separate one maybe in a bigger project if you want to organize your models more, but here I'm going to use the same one. So I'm going to say users collection is db get collection user, and the name of the collection is going to be users. So basically, let's start by creating a suspend function that adds a user. So add user, takes in a user, returns a boolean, and I'm going to say return try users collection, insert one, user was acknowledged, and we catch any exceptions here. We can print any errors and return false if we have any exceptions. Okay. I'm also going to create a function that checks if the username already exists. So check if username exists, and it takes a username, returns a boolean, and we are going to check, this is going to return users collection, and find, we need to pass our filter here. Let's create a filter calls filters, and we are checking for the ID, which is underscore ID, because we set the username as the ID, and the value we're looking for is username. We basically pass the filter here, and we say limit 1, and first or null does not equal to null. So we say limit here 1 which basically means that it tells MongoDB that okay, you look for this filter, but as soon as you find one document in the database that matches this filter, you basically stop. This is useful if you have like a lot of documents. So like instead of letting the filter to go through all the documents, which is really inefficient, we don't need that here, because we know for sure, because this is the ID, that there's only going to be one entry or none, basically. And basically first or null returns the first user if he exists. So if this filter returns any results, and if the user doesn't exist, it's going to be null. And that's how we make sure that the user doesn't exist here. Okay, let's make the last function, which is going to check basically if the username and password are correct. So let's name this check username for password, and this is going to take username string and password string, and let's return a boolean here. Now I'm going to create a filter which will get the current user from the username. So underscore ID is the field, the value is the username passed, and we say actual password equals users collection find filter, limit this to 1, and we say first or null, and dot password, and if this is null, just return false. Okay, so we read the password, the actual password saved in the database, and then we compare the password that the user sent with the actual one from the database. So return password equals actual password, just like this. Okay, let's go to the routes package. Let's create some routes for these functions, because they are useless like this. So in the routes package, new file, let's name them user routes, and create a function here. Let's extend routes, so user routes, and let's create our routes here. Our first route, first we need users to register, so this is going to be a post request, so / register, and here we need to receive the body that the client is supposed to send for registering, and I'm going to use a try catch block here. So account request is call receive, oh no, receive, not request, receive, thanks, and it's going to receive an account request. And here we create a user, so user equals user, we're basically creating a new user, and we basically take information from the account request and use it to create our user like this. And then we say if we basically first we're going to check if the username already exists, so check if username exists, user.username, and if the username exists, if this returns true, we are going to respond, not request, respond with HTTP status code. So let's respond with OK, and let's use simple response to say false to indicate that this did not succeed, and the message is going to be username already exists. And I got the wrong overload, I guess. Yes, respond, this one. Okay, so else, if the username does not exist, what are we going to do? We are going to insert the user into the database. So we add the user here, and if the insertion was successful, this add user function will return true. So we respond with HTTP status code, okay, simple response, true, account created successfully. Else we respond with some error, basically status code, okay, simple response, false, and you say no, or just say error, please try again. So that's the try block basically here, and we are going to catch any exceptions in the try block. So here we can just print any statements we want, but we expect an exception to be thrown, which is a content transformation exception. So if the client does not send the correct body, does not send the correct data in the request, a content transformation exception will be thrown. So we can handle that here. So we can say, for example, we can actually use two catch blocks. So we can catch content transformation exception here, and we can respond here and say respond with bad request and simple response false, and say username and password are required. And here we can respond with the same, but say something else, something went wrong. Okay, maybe. The next endpoint is the login. So let me scroll down a bit, and it's also going to be a post endpoint. So it's going to be a login. We are also going to try to receive the user like we did. Let me actually copy the catch block from here. Okay, so after we receive the user, or not the user, actually the account request, which is this, and let's actually transform this to a user like this. And what we want to do is check the username of that, or the password of that username against the given password. So we use the check username for password function, and we pass user.username. Actually, we don't need that user here, so let's just use account request.username and account request.password like this. So if this was successful, we respond with status code okay and simple response login was successful. Else we respond with simple response false, username or password okay is incorrect. Okay, so that should be it for a basic setup here. Before we run and try this, let's actually call the users route function. So go to the routing KT file, and here in the routing block, make sure to call the user routes and run our server. Okay, let's go to Postman, and let's create a new request and localhost 8080 and register. Here, change this to a post request. Go to body raw, make sure this is JSON, and pass username or ID like this, not username. And the username, I'm going to say Taha. Password is going to be, for example, 1234. Okay, so let's register. So it says account created successfully. Let's try to register one more account, or let's try to register again with the with the same username, and it should say username already exists. Okay, so let's duplicate this tab real quick to try the login and go to body. Now I changed the password, so let's try to log in. So it says username or password is incorrect. If I make the password correct and try again, it should say login was successful. Okay, let's go to MongoDB Compass. Open, make sure to connect to your local server if you haven't, using the connect button here. Open your database, and we have a new users collection. Open that, and as you can see, the user that we have just used to register is here. However, as you can see, the password here is saved in plain text, which is really bad and really unsecure. Because on the one hand, if our database was leaked for any reason, anyone can see what the password is. But the second thing is the site admin, and the developers or the database administrator can actually see the passwords of the users, and this is something you don't want. So how can we fix this? So to fix this, there are like the topic of authentication is a really big topic, so I'm not going to cover everything in it. Basically, I'm just covering the essentials. I'm giving you a very basic solution that I believe it's very reasonable and it should work for most cases. But of course, do your own research, and there are a lot of different things that you can use. But for the sake of this tutorial, and we want to save our users' data in our database here in MongoDB. So what can we do to make saving our users in our database more secure? Now, on the one hand, we can hash our passwords. So what do I mean by hashing? Hashing is basically doing some computations to the password here, for example, and it will come up with a different string, that is not the password in plain text, basically, and it's technically impossible to reverse, to the original password, which is this one. And let me actually go to my blog post here, because there's plenty of explanation here if you would like to read it. But in addition to hashing the password, which actually adds a level of security, now hashing a specific password or a specific string will always generate the same hash. So for example, if my password is 123 and another user has the same password 123, our hashes are going to be the same, on our server, because we use the same function and the same algorithm to create our hashes. So it's going to be the same hash. So to add another layer of security and make it a bit harder, we can add salt to all of the passwords after we hash them. So it's basically a random string that you append to the password after you hash it, and you save the password with the hash in your database. So that way, even if two users have the same password, because you are adding a random salt to each one's password, no one will have the same hash in the database, and this will make it harder to figure out, or for a hacker to figure out what the password is. So let's get started with this. Now first, we are going to need this commons codec. I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but we're going to need this library. So copy the dependency and go to IntelliJ, go to build.gradle, and paste this here in your dependencies block. Click the sync button. Okay, after Gradle finishes syncing, I'm going to go to the post real quick, to the blog post, and I'm going to need to borrow this this file, the code from this file. So basically, these two functions are utility functions that we are going to use to hash our passwords and compare an actual password when the user tries to log in with the hash in the database. So you'll see what I mean in a moment. Okay. So I'm going to create a new file in the utils package. Not new package, but new file called password utils Kotlin file, and I'm going to paste my two functions here. Now the first function is a get hash with salt function, which basically takes the plain password that the user have entered when they register, basically, and it generates a hashed password with a salt and returns it for you, so we can save it in the database. The salt length here is by default 32, but you can change it if you want. And we are using the SHA-1 algorithm here for hashing also, so keep that in mind. And as you can see, the function returns the salt with the hash, appended as a one string. And the check for password function basically extracts the salt from the hash and then tries to compare, it actually compares the password the password that the user entered, the new password that we are trying to make sure that is correct, with the actual hash that we've got from the database. Okay, so let's use these two functions. First, go to database kt, and where we save our user here, where we insert the user into the database. What we want to do is, before we insert, we actually go to the click control, hold control and click this, and go to the route, the register route. So where we use this, before we create a user with the plain password, what we want to do is, instead of creating a user with this password, I'm going to use the function, so get hash with salt, and I'm going to pass my password like that. So when a user is created, now is created with a hashed password. And the second thing is, we want to, when we log in, we want to check the password, but not without comparing the string in the request with the string in the database, because now in the database we have a hashed string. So go to the database kt file, and here in the check username for password function, instead of doing this check, we're going to remove that and use the function check hash for password, and we pass the password, the plain password that we got from the request itself, with the actual password, which is the hashed password that we've got from the database. And this function should return true if the operation was successful. Now let's restart our server and go to Postman. Now let's try to create another user. I'm going to call this Taha1, password 12345, register. Okay, it says account created successfully. Now if you go to Mongo Compass and try to refresh, we see that we have Taha1 like this, and the password is this huge hashed string, as you can see here. Let's go back and try to do a login. So let's try a login, Taha1, and let's try with an incorrect password first. So it says incorrect. Let's try the correct password. As you can see, we have logged in successfully. Okay, cool. So we can make sure that so far we make sure that the password is correct. But how can we protect specific endpoints, like the add fruit endpoint, for example, from being used by anyone? Because we want only registered users to be able to make calls to that endpoint. We go back to IntelliJ, and here we are going to take a look at the security KT file, which is one of the plugins that we've installed in the very first video when we created our project. Now, if you haven't added this when you created your project, don't worry. You can go to the blog post and it will show you the exact dependencies that you need to add, and you can create this security KT file manually. So let's open this file, and as you can see, we have some pre-made configuration here because we have added both JWT and basic authentication. So it has configuration for both here. Now for this tutorial, we are going to only implement basic authentication. I'm going to leave JWT for the next one because this one's getting pretty long already. So yeah, let's get started. So first, I'm going to take this JWT code here. I'm just going to comment this and collapse it like this because we don't want to be distracted by it. And as you can see, we have this authentication block, and inside the authentication block, we have this basic block. Now, basic authentication is a very simple form of authentication. Basic means that whenever you make a request, you are going to send the credentials like the username and password. You are going to send them with each request that you make, basically. That's why it's called basic, so it's very basic one. So if you don't have one, if you don't have this authentication block, you can basically go to the blog post again, but it's really simple code. You can just write it off the screen right here. But what we are concerned with here is this validate function. So basically, the basic block here says that this is basic authentication. You have some various configuration options that you can use. For example, the realm, you can specify a different realm if you want. We can name it fruit server, for example. And this validate block will determine how credentials sent in basic authentication, to our server, how are they validated, basically. So how can the server, or how can the this authentication library authenticate the user? So right now, as you can see, it's a very simple setup. It just checks if the name is the same as the password, and if it's the same, it authenticates successfully. But we want to change that, so I'm going to delete this. So I'm going to say check username for password, and here we have access to the username that the client sent. So we can say credentials.name, and the password that the client sent is credential.password. And this function will basically call the function. It's the function that we created earlier in the database. It will check if the credentials are correct for us and return true, which will make this statement basically pass. And if this statement passes, we have this user ID principal here, which basically we can use to attach a user in ID principal to the request, so we can easily access it later in our authenticated endpoints, basically. This sets the user ID principal to the name, which is the username, basically. So the ID principal here is going to be the name. Okay. Now that's it for the basic authentication here. So we have the name. We can actually remove the name for now and leave it like that without a name. The last thing that you want to do is go to the fruit routes here, and where we add the fruit here, the add fruit request, we would like to protect this. So we make an authenticate block like this, and we put the whole the whole post request, the whole block here of code inside this authenticate block. You can do that by holding Command Shift and pressing the arrow key while the cursor is at the top header of the block like this. So this will put the whole thing in the authenticate block, and this should protect the post request like this. So let's restart the server, and we have a crash. So okay, authentication with name not found. Okay, I think I removed the name. Yeah, I removed the name here from basic, but it still uses that name here. So actually this routing block, I don't need it, so I'm going to delete the whole thing. Let's restart the server. Okay, now the server is working correctly. And if we go back to Postman and try to add a fruit, for example, okay, let's try to add something. If it will respond with 401 unauthorized, as you can see here. Okay, so the endpoint is protected now. So if we want to add something, we should add an authorization header to the request, and we can do that in Postman by going to authorization here and change the auth type to basic, because that's what we are using, and just type your username and your password. So let's try to make a wrong password for this, and it still says unauthorized, but if we make the password correct, it should add the fruit for us. Okay, one last thing, okay, for this tutorial. I know this is getting very long, but one last thing. I would like to, when someone tries to add a fruit, because we are authenticated right now, I would like to append the name of the username of the person who made the request to that data class, so it stays saved in the database. You know, so first I'm going to go to the fruit model, and I'm going to add a field. I'm going to call it added by, and it's going to be a nullable string. Basically here, serial name is going to be added by, just like that. This is going to hold the name or the username of the person who added the fruit. Now go to fruit routes, and in the post request where we add the fruit, I'm going to create a new variable. It's going to be val added by. This is going to be call dot principal, and here we pass user ID principal, and then dot name. Okay, so this is a nullable, but this shouldn't be null, so you can make extra checks here, but I'm just going to use some default string here for simplicity. So unknown, if there's if it can't find the username, but since this endpoint is authenticated, basically it is required that we have a username here. Okay, the last thing, when we create the fruit object, we added by and match it with this. Okay, so let's restart the server and try to add something. Okay, go Postman. Let's try to add something here. Orange. This one's going to be winter. I'm going to change this to this orange picture here. And okay, let's send. Okay, so it was added successfully, and as you can see here, it says added by Tahawan, which is the username that I currently use with the authorization on this request. And if we go to get fruits, here, let's remove this season and try to get the fruits. As you can see, we have this orange that is added by me here, that I just added. This one I have before, that's why it says null here. But this is the one that we've just added right here. So that is it for this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, you might want to do the same thing for the patch and the delete requests, protect them with the authorization block to make sure that only authorized users can make requests. But yeah, that's going to be it. And the next tutorial, we are going to implement JWT authentication, which is going to involve using beer tokens. So we don't need to pass the username and the password when we make each request. Instead, we are going to use tokens. So until next time, hit the like button, make sure you comment, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.